Alright, my name is Kyle McKenzie. 55 people shot and 10 killed on a holiday weekend. These statistics are a lot better than last year's when there were 82 shootings and 16 fatalities. This may sound like a movie or a scene out of a Middle East war zone, but these statistics are pertaining to the 4th of July weekend in Chicago. When children are supposed to be playing outside listening to fireworks, they're instead hiding inside, going to bed to the sound of automatic gunfire. Everyone knows that Chicago is the home of the Sears Tower and used to be a great industrial city in America. What people don't know is the other side of Chicago. Chicago is grappling with not just a crime or drug problem, but a huge gang problem. Chicago's gang problem is such a big one that it affects the ordinary lives of many people in Chicago. During this speech, I'm going to touch on some of the reasons and some of the impacts of being in a city which has approximately 70,000 gang members. In this speech, I'm mostly going to touch on the proliferation of guns and the reasons for the huge murder rate. I'm also going to touch on the reasons why so many young men and women choose this specific way of life. This topic is very serious because most people don't know we have a war zone in America's own backyard. I first want to touch on the great availability of weapons in Chicago. A famous rapper in Chicago once said, "It's easier to find a gun than a parking space in Chicago." Guns are very easily brought into Chicago and sold to gang members because you only need one transaction on record to buy however many guns in the state of Illinois. Children as young as 10 are known to sometimes tote guns. One just has to look at Chicago underground rap videos to watch minors toting guns that are sometimes too big for them to even aim. The laws on the books are very lax when it comes to gun control. Even though there is a huge murder rate and gun problem, no major gun suppliers have been arrested in Chicago for years. It's stated in a July 16 Chicago Sun-Times article, in the first 4 months of 2015, almost 700 people were arrested for illegal gun possession, and 60% of them were out by the 1st of April. There are even 4 with 2 gun arrests, and they were still back on the streets. I'm not saying any of these people don't deserve second chances, but if you're an active gang member just getting out of jail with a weapons charge, what is stopping you from picking up another one? Another sad quote is many youth live by is, "I'd rather get caught with it than without it." This is the mentality a lot of youth are growing up with, but I will touch on that later. I'm not saying the police aren't taking guns off the streets either. The Chicago Police Department take away thousands of guns from gang members annually. Even though LA and New York have bigger populations, the CPD is confiscating guns at a rate of 7 to 1 compared to New York and 3 to 1 compared to LA. The grand amount of guns in Chicago is definitely contributing to the gang problem because everybody is strapped and carrying a weapon to protect their drugs, money, and territory. Now I'm going to touch on the reasons for the mass involvement of youth in gang activity in Chicago. Unemployment is the biggest problem. Imagine if you live in a predominantly black neighborhood where not many people have jobs. In a July 30th article from the Chicago Tribune, it said even if you're lucky enough to grow up in a 2-parent household, if you're a black teenager, the unemployment rate is hovering around 90%. You can't get a job and your family needs money, so what are you to do? This is the type of question that's presented to thousands of young black males in Chicago every day. They have the choice to keep going through the hard journeys of finding a job that is probably minimum wage or go out on the streets and get involved in a gang and make thousands in a short period of time. Sadly, many youths are choosing the latter because they feel hopeless. There has been a counterculture growing in Chicago for decades now. This culture desensitizes the community to violence, glorifies the use of guns to kill enemies, and prides itself when drugs are sold in large amounts, and seemingly poor people become rich overnight. The big difference between the gangs of Chicago in the past and the gangs of Chicago now is the breakdown in the structure and the hierarchy of these gangs. In the 1990s, many public housing high-rises were demolished because they literally became strongholds for the gangs. They became places where not even the police could venture in them. After demolishing them, many people had to move and gangs spread and fought where gangs had not even been before. Also in the 1990s, new laws were established that allowed authorities to put all the crimes of one gang on the leaders of that gang. The effect of this was the mass arrest of leaders from all different types of gangs in Chicago. For the first time ever, gang members did not have to answer to anybody or follow a specific type of command. Of course, this led to chaos and the fragmentation of these gang powerhouses. Before, you had around 10 major gangs fighting each other. In a March 20th, 2015 article from the New York Tribune, it said since the mass fragmentation, there has been over 600 warring factions of different gangs spread across the city. Sadly, gangbanging has also become something that is passed down from generation to generation. There are thousands of youth born every year in Chicago that have a parent or somebody living in the household who is an active gang member. This culture of violence is literally being passed down from father to son. I've touched on the massive amount of guns in Chicago, and I've lightly touched on the reasons why the gang problem is so big here. To start off, a big reason why there is a huge murder rate is because the police department in Chicago is outgunned and outmanned. There are 70,000 gang members for around 12,000 cops. That's 5 gang members for every police officer in the city of Chicago. No matter how many guns you take off the street, you can't just take thousands of people to jail or prison at once. Another reason why the murder rate is so high is because of the involvement of Mexican drug cartels, specifically the Sinaloa cartel. This cartel is run by a man named Chapo Guzman, who is named Public Enemy #1 by the Chicago branch of the DEA. He is known to have turned Chicago, the U.S. third largest city, into one of the biggest drug distribution hubs ever to be known in America. There's also some neighborhoods in Chicago that are over 80% Hispanic, so operatives from the drug cartel can easily blend in. There are other reasons why the cartel chose Chicago to be their main American base. Chicago is the world's third largest handler of shipping containers, which makes it easy for the members to smuggle guns and drugs into the city. The city also has over 1 billion square feet of warehouse property. You're probably wondering what this has to do with the murder rate. It states in a 2013 Business Insider article that because they have a monopoly on all the drugs, they can set the prices, which make it harder for street-level dealers to make a profit. A result of that is street-level dealers try to take more territory to get their profit margin up, and this just creates more gang warfare and more violence. I discussed today many dilemmas that the people of Chicago are facing on a day-to-day basis. A lot of these problems emerge from violence and drugs distributed to gang members like a plague on the city. I first spoke on the wide availability of guns in Chicago because of lax gun laws and other factors. I also focused on the main cause of gang membership, which is a breakdown in culture and pervasive joblessness. It was also said that the effects of the Sinaloa cartel have also been a big reason for the great deal of murders that Chicago has. To summarize, Chicago needs to deal with the problem of gang membership with a stern hand. Too many children are being taken away from their families by stray bullets coming from the guns of gang members. I ask you this all today to put yourself in the shoes of people living in this violent plagued neighborhood of Chicago. Would you want to raise your child in a war zone? Stop it.